One of the biggest mistakes people make is opening PowerPoint before they plan the presentation. They begin creating slides without first deciding exactly what they want to communicate. However, a quality PowerPoint presentation should begin with some form of planning. That's what we're going to cover today. We're going to use something that I've created called the Presentation Planning Worksheet. It's designed to help you to organize the thinking that happens before building, developing, or revising a PowerPoint presentation. If you'd like to follow along, you can download the worksheet from my website using the link in the description box below. Once the planning is finished, I'll open PowerPoint and show you how I implemented the plan on the slides. The sample topic that I'll be using today to illustrate how to use the Presentation Planning Worksheet is improving team communication. That should sound familiar if you've watched the previous video. Let's get started. This is the Professional Presentation Planning Worksheet. And as the worksheet states, it will help you to plan a clear, professional workplace presentation before you open PowerPoint. I have created two versions of this worksheet for you. There is the blank version, which you're seeing right now. As you can see, there's spaces for you to think about your ideas and topics and to fill it in, which will help facilitate coming up with a really great presentation. There's also a completed version of the Presentation Planning Worksheet. Both versions, the blank version of the worksheet and the completed versions, are available for free on my website. And the link to the website is in the description box. Now I'm going to switch over to the completed version of the worksheet, and we're going to work from there for the rest of the video. Part 1 asks us to choose the type of workplace presentation we're creating. And as you can see, the worksheet has several common options here. Honestly, you're probably going to create several of these presentations during your career. For example, a company update might include communicating organizational changes or major announcements. You may create a financial results presentations where you explain the revenue or expenses or budget performance and financial forecast. If you're leading a department, you may want to create a presentation to summarize a team's accomplishments, priorities, or upcoming work. If you're in the HR department, you might want to create a presentation to introduce company policies, explain employee benefits, workplace expectations, or job responsibilities. To determine which one of these boxes fit the presentation that you're currently working on, ask yourself this question: what workplace situation is this presentation that I'm working on right now intended to address? So for my sample presentation, I've selected Workplace Communication Improvement Plan because my presentation topic is going to be improving team communication during project update. And if you recall from the previous video, for that presentation, I left the topic as being improving team communication, but in this case, I changed it to improving team communication during project updates. Do you know why? The initial topic that I had in just improving team communication was too broad. So I decided to narrow it down to improving team communication during project updates to be more specific. By narrowing this topic down to communication during project updates, we create a clearer focus for the presentation. Now let's move on to part 2. Part 2 asks us to identify the primary purpose of our presentation. The options are listed here. Your presentation may ultimately include a few of these purposes. For example, a presentation may inform the audience while also recommending a solution or encouraging some action. However, one purpose should always be the guide of the presentation. To decide which box to select, ask yourself this question: what is the most important thing I want this presentation to accomplish? For my sample presentation, I am recommending 3 practical strategies for improving communication during project update. Therefore, I selected recommend. I also completed the purpose statement. This statement identifies what I'm recommending and explains the intended results. If this were primarily a training type presentation, the statement might focus on teaching employees how to complete a specific task. If it were related to a company update, the purpose might be to inform employees about an organizational change. If it were a financial results presentation, the purpose might be to report financial performance and explain the factors affecting the results. For this presentation, however, the primary purpose is to recommend 3 strategies that teams can use during project updates. Now let's move on to part 3. Part 3 focuses on the audience. This is important because the audience affects the level of detail, terminology, the examples that you use, and the context that we include in the presentation. If you look at the worksheet, the first question asks, who is my audience? Well, my audience for this presentation is project managers, team leaders, and project team members who participate in project update meetings. So when you're listing who your audience is, try to think of everybody who is going to be involved in what your presentation is addressing. The next question asks, what does this audience already know about the topic? For my presentation, I know that they understand basic project management terminology, project updates, deadlines, responsibilities, and actions. Because the audience already understands these concepts, I don't need to spend some time going into detail. I expect the people in this audience to already know those terms and how they're used and what their meanings of those terms are. So that means that I can focus on the communication practices that need to improve instead. The next question asks, what does this audience need from me? Always. This is what the audience needs. Practical, easy to apply strategies for making project updates clearer, more consistent, and more helpful. I always want to make sure that the information that I provide to my audience is practical, it's something that's easy to apply, that it makes sense, that it's consistent with the company, and then it's actual useful information. So that's what the audience needs. That's from me. The audience does not need a broad discussion about communication theory. No, I need to get straight to the point. They need strategies they can use during actual project updates and meetings. The final question in this section asks, well, what questions or concerns might they have? These are the questions that I came up with. How can we reduce misunderstandings? How can meetings be more productive? How can everyone leave with the same information? And how can we improve accountability? These questions help identify what the presentation should address. By the end of the presentation, the audience should understand how the recommended strategies respond to these concerns. Now let's move on to part 4. Part 4 is asking us to define the main message. The main message is the one idea we want the audience to remember. For this example presentation, my main message is consistent project updates, improve communication, reduce confusion, and help teams make better decisions. This statement brings the presentation together. Every major point that I cover in this presentation should support this primary message. The presentation is not simply about conducting meetings or providing information. It is about using a consistent approach so that project teams communicate more clearly and make better decisions, which is the end goal. If a section of my presentation does not support this message, then I'll need to consider whether it really belongs in the presentation at all. Moving on to part 5. In this section, the worksheet is directing us to identify 3 key points of our presentation. Most workplace presentations are easier to follow when they are organized around 3 main points. And for each key point, the worksheet provides space for the main idea, see right there, and for a supporting detail or an example to illustrate the point. So as you can see, I've completed the 3 main points for my presentation. I have them as use a standard update format, and then the reasons why. I have clarify roles and deadlines, and then I gave an example of what to do, and then I have end every meeting with next steps, and it's also directing team members about what to do and how to do those next steps. Together, these 3 points support the main message and the purpose of the presentation. In part 6, we need to decide the next step. This means deciding what should happen after the presentation. At the end of a workplace presentation, the audience should know what to do to decide what to approve, review, remember, apply, or take action on. The worksheet includes several possible outcomes about what we can do. And some of the examples of these are to approve the recommended plan. Do we want participants to use the new project update format? Make a decision. Apply 3 communication strategies is what I have selected here. But if there's some other action that you want your audience to do after the presentation, you can include yours here. And you can also see that I've completed this statement to spell out in detail what the next steps are. This statement gives the audience clear actions. They should not leave the presentation wondering, okay, so what am I expected to do with this information? No, we need to be clear about what we expect the audience to do with the information that we just took all that time to provide to them. And after we've done all of that work of deciding a topic, deciding a purpose, understanding the audience, defining our main message, and coming up with 3 main points, and then deciding what the next steps are, the next thing that we need to do according to part 7 is to build the presentation structure. So as you'll see in part 7, the worksheet includes space for the slide, the purpose of the slide, and our notes or plan title for the slide. So let's take a look at this. I think it's worth for us to go through each of these slides just so you'll be able to see when I move over to PowerPoint in a little while how this is going to translate over. So right now I have this layout as slide 1 being our title slide, and then the purpose is going to be to introduce the presentation topic. And there's some notes about this slide. Slide 2 is going to be our purpose slide. That's where I'm going to explain what the presentation will accomplish. Slide 3, I'm going to talk about the context or the problem that we are having, and then I'm going to explain why clear communication during those project updates matter. Slide 4, I'm going to talk about current challenges and then identify communication problems. And then after that, the next 3 slides, I'm going to go into the points that we came up with. The key point 1, key point 2, key point 3. And then after those, I'm going to follow along with the presentation planning worksheet and discuss a recommendation or action plan, what I expect the audience to do after the presentation. And then I'll follow that up with the key takeaways, really just reinforcing what the main message is, just summarizing the presentation. And then finally, a closing slide where I'm just going to invite questions from the audience. So after doing all of this work in this step, we now have a complete structure for the presentation. Each slide has a specific purpose, and the order guides the audience from the problem to the recommendations and then to the next action. We're almost ready to move over into PowerPoint. But first, let's take a look at part 8. Part 8 is a quick review checklist. It's asking us to review the plan that we just created. So let's take a look at the review items and what they're asking. And just keep in mind, after you've completed this worksheet and you do this part 8, all of the answers to these questions should be yes before moving to PowerPoint. If you don't have a yes answer for some of these, then that means that you need to go back into the worksheet, do some more thinking about your topic, and flesh out the ideas that any other ideas you may have to get these items to a yes. All of these are yes for me. And if you keep scrolling down under this checklist, I have a completed example to show you why I marked all of these as yes for me. So here's a completed example of my presentation based on the presentation planning worksheet. I know my presentation topic is improving team communication during project updates. I have the purpose, recommend 3 practical strategies. I know my audience. I know my main message that I'm going to communicate. I have the key points listed, and I have a next step. So this ticks all of those boxes from the checklist. And after this, I have an example slide structure as well. So when I go over to PowerPoint, this is what I'm going to do in PowerPoint. This is how the layout of the presentation is going to look. I already have the slides ready. I have 10 slides, and I know what's going to be on all 10 slides. And this was made possible because I actually completed the worksheet. I did the work. And with that said, let's move on over to PowerPoint and let me show you how I translated all this work that we did in the worksheet into an actual PowerPoint. Now let's review the presentation in slideshow mode. The first slide introduces the topic, improving team communication during updates. The second slide explains the purpose of the presentation. The next two slides establish the context by explaining why communication matters and identifying the current communication challenges. We then move into the three main recommendations. We have strategy 1 is to use a standard update format. Strategy 2, clarify roles and deadlines. And strategy 3, end every meeting with next steps. After those recommendations, the presentation includes a recommended action plan. The key takeaway slide reinforces the main message and the three strategies that we discussed. The final slide invites questions and confirms the next steps. So as you can see, the worksheet gave us a clear plan for the entire presentation before we began focusing on the slides. That's it. I hope you agree that clarifying your purpose, audience, main message, key point, and next action can make the slide building process much more focused. And remember, you can download a copy of my presentation planning worksheet from my website, which is linked in the description box. In the next video, we'll continue working with this presentation, but we're going to focus more on the aesthetics, like formatting text, adding images, transitions, and animation. But we're still going to make sure that the information is clear, consistent, and professional. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.